Hi, it's me, Greg. I'm here in our kitchen at Stonecrop Farm, and today for our how-to video, I'm going to talk about how to make our favorite breakfast potatoes. We put up a little post of a picture that we made breakfast potatoes last week, and a few people said they wanted to learn how to do it, so here we go. So first we're going to talk about the ingredients and the equipment, or say the pans and spatulas and that kind of stuff that we use to make these potatoes, and then I'll give you some pointers, and that should set you up pretty well to do it. We'll put a recipe card in the comments below just a little bit after we do the video while our potatoes are cooking, but I'm not actually going to show you the cooking process just because it's a little bit noisy with the frying the potatoes on the stovetop for doing a video, and you probably don't want to look at potatoes cooking for 7 to 10 minutes. Anyways, so basically what we are starting with in terms of ingredients, the way we like to do it is about 1.5 pounds of potatoes. I generally prefer using waxy potatoes, like usually new potatoes or potatoes with a lower starch content. They hold together better in the pan, so basically you get these little matchsticks, and they hold together better in the pan while you're cooking them. We also usually chop up maybe about a cup of chopped onions, which is usually like one small medium onion or maybe half of a big onion, and then usually 1 bell pepper. Sometimes we throw in a little bit of hot pepper that we've chopped up, which gives a really nice extra flavor there too. And then we use salt and pepper to taste. In terms of what you are going to cook the potatoes and the vegetables in terms of the fat or oil that you're going to use, we love to do it with like a pure rendered pork lard. That's our favorite thing to do it with. We also use vegetable oil or canola oil as an alternative. One of the most important things is just keeping in mind that you want a high smoke point, just because the potatoes do cook for a little while over like a medium-high heat. So I would avoid using olive oil just because you'll end up with more smoke than you really want in your kitchen, just because of the high temperature. And even though we do recommend using rendered lard in there, because the pork fat gives a really nice flavor to it, I would avoid using bacon drippings also, as tasty as those are, just because of the nature of the drippings with that little bit of sugar that is used in the curing process for the bacon. It can end up causing the potatoes to stick to the pan pretty badly, and we want to avoid that as much as possible, because no one likes cleaning burnt layer of potatoes off the bottom of a pan. That is the least favorite job in our kitchen. So, in terms of the pan, we just use a really simple steel pan, and we do have a lid with it. The lid is actually pretty important. It took us at least a year or two after we started cooking breakfast potatoes this way to realize how important the lid is, but I'll get to that in just a little bit. We also use a thin spatula. You basically want as thin of a spatula as you can get so that you can actually scrape under the potatoes when it's time to turn them. If you use a really thick spatula or like a wooden spoon or something like that, you're basically going to scrape the uncooked potatoes away from the kind of crispy cooked potatoes that's on the bottom of the pan when you're doing that first turn of the potatoes. So you really want to use basically as thin a spatula as you can. This one, I don't even know what I would classify this one as. This one has been in my mom's kitchen for as long as I can remember, and then they eventually didn't want it anymore, so we snatched it up. Like a fish spatula is super thin, those will work well, but basically the thinner the better in order to get under the potatoes without actually damaging them while you're cooking them. And then the other important kitchen tool that we like to use for this is a little mandolin slicer. We're not patient enough to matchstick 1.5 pounds of potatoes by hand with a knife. So what we use is this super simple mandolin slicer. It's basically just a blade with a plastic guide, and then it's got this little insert that basically cuts at a 90-degree angle from the main blade on here, which then gives you all little matchsticks. The one thing I will say about these is the blade on this is very sharp, so you want to be careful when you're using them. It's very possible to cut yourself. Fortunately, we've never done that, but we've heard stories about people who do, so just be very careful if you use one of these. This one is called Ben Renner, and we'll post a link to this. It's a fairly inexpensive starter for a mandolin slicer. It was recommended by one of our favorite recipe bloggers, Smitten Kitchen, who I'm sure you've seen us reference a number of times. But yeah, basically, just as a very brief description or example of how to use this, basically just put the potato here, and you just slide it. Sometimes slides better than other times, but that's basically it. And then you end up with these lovely little matchsticks coming off the bottom. So when you're ready to actually start cooking these, what we recommend is to get the pan pretty hot. Like I said, medium-high heat is really a good thing. And then add your oil or your lard or whatever other fat you're going to use to cook them in into the pan. It's usually a couple tablespoons, and get that pretty hot. And then actually get that really hot. And then add the potatoes and give them a quick stir, just so everything gets coated in oil. And then you're going to put the lid on, covering the pan most of the way. And then you're going to just let it sit. Usually takes about 5 minutes on the first sit. That first contact is really important to let that kind of take an effect, and it's going to sear the bottom of those potatoes, and you're going to end up with a really crispy layer on the bottom, which is really nice. It helps to have basically as big a pan as you can possibly have, so you have as much surface area on the bottom of the pan as possible. And then keeping the lid most of the way on will cause the steam coming off of the potatoes and the trapped heat in the pan to actually start cooking the layer of potatoes that's not touching the pan right away. That way you don't end up with a bunch of potatoes that are uncooked while you have a bunch of potatoes on the bottom that are already basically done. Because no one wants crunchy breakfast potatoes. So after those have cooked for a little bit, and we'll give exact times in the recipe card when we put that up, based on our experience. The potatoes should be starting to get tender. You can stir them a bit, and at that point you can add some veggies. We generally just do onions and peppers. If there's some other veggie that you want to put in, you can be super creative. Just base the timing of when you put the veggies in based on how quickly they cook. So if you wanted to make this like a totally different sort of a savory dish, I'm sure you could add carrots or celery or something like that, to make it kind of a lunchtime or dinner dish. Yeah. So basically at that point, when you're putting the veggies in, we still put the lid back on just to make sure that the veggies that aren't right at the bottom of the pan actually cook appropriately with everything. And then towards the end of when you're cooking is the time when you want to salt and pepper the entire dish. If you salt and pepper too early, those flavors are actually just going to kind of cook out of the dish, which is not such a big deal with the pepper. You can always add more pepper, but you don't really want to add too much salt at the beginning, have it cook out, have that flavor kind of cook out, and then just add a ton more salt at the end. Because then you've got the same amount of salt flavor that you want, but even more sodium in there. So we always like to salt towards the end of the dish when it's got something like this cooking on a stovetop. But yeah, this is the basics of how to do it. I'm actually about to cook a very late breakfast. We were out working for a little bit longer than I expected this morning before coming back in for breakfast. So I'm about to start cooking a late breakfast, and I'll put some photos up as we go and get the recipe card up in the comments below. So yeah, let us know in the comments if you are going to try this out yourself, and I hope this was helpful and hope you enjoy the next round of breakfast potatoes that you make. Thanks. Bye.